welcome to today's event, but also participants from the AAAC, which is the African Australian Advocacy Center. I would want to say Samkela Mawuya, welcome. We also have participants from different African community organizations. So I want to say to you, Karibu. We also have academics and students from all over Australia. Mawuya, Samkela, welcome to you as well. I specifically would want to also welcome organizers of this event from the three institutions that I talked about. Ajoa from AFSAAP, Noel from AAAC, Matlepo from AAAC, Dr. Renzao in absentia, is not here, is traveling from AFSAAP, Messi, Gitonga, and Mohammed Mahmoud from the University of Wollongong, as well as Dr. Lev Uswagu from the ANA, the African Australians Research Network. So welcome. At this moment, I want to hand over to Aisha for a bit of introductions before we go to our first speaker. Over to you, Aisha.
Thanks so much, Rugari. Hi, everyone. As Rugari mentioned, I'm Aisha. It's really lovely to have everyone joining us today, this afternoon. Before I introduce our first speaker, I too would like to pay my respects to the traditional owners and custodians on the land in which we're all dialing in from. I'm extremely fortunate to be living and working on the beautiful Ngunnawal and Ngambri country. And I pay my respects to elders past and present, as well as extend that respect to any First Nations people who might be joining us today on this call. And especially in the spirit of National Reconciliation Week, I would also like to recognize that we are on stolen land and sovereignty was never ceded. So yes, as Rugari mentioned, it's be really lovely to hear where everyone's dialing in from. And as you can already see, we have a pretty jam-packed program ahead of us. So I think I'll get straight into it. I first would like to welcome Dr. Janet Zator, who will be speaking on the topic of diaspora and collaboration for development. So over to you, Dr. Janet.
Right. Thank you. I think you've all known my name, Janet Zator. I always teach the pronunciation. The DZ also spells like J in my language. So if you remember Janet Zator, I'm from University of Newcastle. I'm a senior lecturer in economics and the director of the Center for Africa Research, Engagement and Partnership. I'm speaking, and this is not a vote of thanks, but I would also like to acknowledge all the traditional owners of the lands wherever we are gathered here in Australia for all their contribution and care for their land. The honorable African leaders that might be within us, our diplomats and head of representatives from Canberra, I acknowledge all of you. And to the University of Wollongong community and the leaders, the Vice Chancellor and all the senior leaders that have allowed the African Union or African community to thrive there, we thank you. And all the staff that are behind all that we are doing, every person that is part of this organization, I acknowledge all of you. And the organizers of today's African Day celebration, Dr. Mugambe and all the team, all the students, volunteers, most of the names are very, very much familiar with me, or I'm familiar with them. I acknowledge all of you. And to all the participants from everywhere. In fact, we are wide and broad. I had a little glance through the name list and I see a lot of our University of Newcastle or Newcastle residents represented there, or people who have been our alumni. You are all welcome and thank you all for your contributions. I'll also mention, I've got my husband among you, Dr. Michael Jackto. Behind every successful woman, there is a man. So thank you so much for supporting me everywhere. And I would say greetings from the University of Newcastle. the Center for Africa Research, Engagement and Partnership, and all our leaders, our Vice Chancellor, our Deputy Vice Chancellor Global, who supports us so much. I acknowledge all of them. I'm speaking today, I haven't reflected on the topic there, but the topic is about diasporans for development. So who are we? Who are the diasporans? In fact, there are technical definitions of people who migrate voluntarily and those who are forced. But let's say we have all moved from our countries to a destination, our host country. And we all have contributions that we can make towards development, both in the country that we live in and our individual home countries. Different ideas have been expounded or used to look at what makes people move from their home countries to wherever they are. In the early days of the 70s, 60s, it's called brain drain or skill migration. This brain drain has been used by advanced countries to attract skilled people, and it is mainly for the purpose of developing their science and technology, drive their research and development. We were all used to the word of knowledge economy. So it became a brain drain, or attraction of skills from other countries became a drive for increasing growth and development in those countries. It used to be seen as a negative impact on sending countries. But over the years, it has been changed. The idea have been changed, and migrants or diasporans have been classified as people who are contributing some human capital. Again, human capital is a phenomenon where we are born as individuals. We can do everything. We can consume, that is eat, participate in all economic activities. But if we have a little bit more education, we use our skills much more efficiently. So education and health has been used to describe the improvements in people's contribution to the economy. So when diasporans are looked at as human capital contributors, there is a bit of switch from that negative brain drain to positive contribution to the economies where they are. Not only that, there's also some ideas about the cost of having us as human capitals, wherever we are, whether in our host country or our individual home countries. We have children, or we ourselves might go to school, we might use health services, we might use public services, etc. All of them classified as costs. But then we can also contribute to our home country. So there is new idea from that human capital evolution to what is called the socio-cognitive approach. And that one is looking, I will just classify remittances among this group. The idea has been that we come to our host country, we work or we apply ourselves to the opportunities we have here, and we remit, for example, back home. And over the years, World Bank has come up with a great idea about how much contribution Africans have been making. In fact, over $760 million in 2018 currency units. So diasporans have been seen as a great economic drive towards the development of our home country too. A new evolving measure of diasporans is whether we can employ ourselves diplomatically to improve our development, both in our domestic and our host economies. How do we do that? We are voters. In Australia, there's compulsory voting. So diplomatically, if Africans are congregating at a place and our numbers are large enough, we can draw attention from politicians to pay attention to some of our needs, because they will be vying for our votes. Back home, we can also influence our politicians or people and try to educate people, gently to see how we can use a diplomatic win. Even in our host economies, we have our diplomats where we have consents. Let's say we want to go home, we want to contribute, we have finished education or something, or we want to transfer something, or we're coming down here and there is anything, our diplomats are there to help us so that we can be able to use our skills efficiently. So that's about what I would call the diasporans have been doing. I am an economist by profession, so I brought a bit of diagram here to show you what we can do. Within economics, we talk about growth. In fact, growth can be looked at from different perspectives. The most common currently is post-Keynesian idea that we are consumers from birth to death. When you are born, you don't work, but we eat, we wear clothes. When you die, you're not there, but somebody has to get all people around and resources together to bury you. So it's from cradle to the grave, we consume. Some of us in the households also, we invest in businesses. It could be our small African shop or as big as Elon Musk in the US. And then within the government, I've mentioned voting. In fact, you go to South WA, we have one of the parliamentarian as an African. She lived in Newcastle here before going. And then we did even have an African nominee or parliamentarian in Canberra before. So we can have a government role that is through regulation as representatives of government or through participation in electing our representatives as parliamentarians, whether they are from Africa or not, we contribute to those economies. And in terms of trade, we will look broadly at export and import. In fact, the trade component, which we call net trade, it includes all the activities of our diplomats, our experts, and everybody. So in these four groups, that's from consumption to trade, every economy measures how they are performing. And if we talk about development, let's define it as growth plus. In fact, it's a bigger concept like sustainable development. We're looking at living standard. If our living standard is improving, we are developing. If education or any other thing that is not within these restricted definitions of growth, we will classify as development. So diasporans as we are, we can do a lot, either through our economic agency or through any social agency or any activity, first of all, to contribute to growth in our host countries, growth in our domestic economies. And if they are growing year in, year out, it compounds or build up, and then we can have a comfortable development. I'll give some examples. That is, if we look at governance, I gave two examples here. We are thinking, or we are celebrating Africa Day today, or Africa Day that has been started by our forefathers long ago. The whole idea of Africa Day is to bring Africa together because there are benefits. It's never materialized, even though today we're calling it African Union, we are still independent countries. Compare us to Australia. Australia is made up of states and territories. They came together as federation. And take US is also states. They came together and they are states. Currently, you can look at Euro region. Individual countries came together and they form a bloc. There is also a Francophone countries within Africa who use the French currency, and they they are part of, let's call it a pseudo union there. What I want to highlight there is the idea of governance within the federal states or the integrated states is much more smoother. You can move between states in Australia. It doesn't matter whether you are traveling from New South Wales to Queensland. In fact, until COVID came, nobody really knows that states could put up borders and keep people out. We moved quite freely. Trade moves quite freely. And that happens in most of the federation or the federal states. Africa, we have African Union. We have been chipping away the idea that we can come together and form a bloc that will command respect economically. But we are not there yet. You travel to one country, then you have visa problems. In fact, you could be even in your neighboring country and then you're not allowed to go in there. And we used to joke when we were students that the politicians said the idea and then they fly over it, then they leave the people to struggle. And if we think about trade as a vehicle for development, we can see that, in fact, if African Union, the Africa 2060 or 2050 ideas we're dreaming about, if we can come together, we probably can be much more stronger and be able to promote development. And that is what some of our agency as diasporans can be. We can whisper gently and nudge our individual countries. Even as individuals that we are here, we can collaborate and begin to open doors so that we work together. Another agency I was talking about, trade. What I have here is using research and development. Many of us are here for ourselves, either economically or we are forced to be here. We have had so many opportunities. Can we find channels or ways and import or export those ideas back home? We have learned, Australia, for example, cervical cancer screening. A vaccine is developed here, and it has really controlled cervical cancer. Can we work together with our researchers here diplomatically, strategically, and then get research that we can do in Africa? We talk, I mean, Ubuntu, so many ideas, I'll come to that. STEM, that is science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medicine. We have a lot of research going on there. And then the humanity and the arts and social sciences. We have things like tourism. We have teaching. We have so many other skills there, even arts. How do we promote our arts artisans from Africa so that we get them some exposure here? We have celebrations which allow them to also exhibit their arts or something. We could think about all of those as vehicles or opportunities for us to work together with our community. And then we can build what we call the transcultural researches. If we are doing that, not only researches, it be social, but transcultural means we have a lot of differences in culture as countries in Africa, as countries or regions or individuals in Australia. We do work together, but can we go one step further so that what we are doing can count towards economic growth and therefore development? Partnerships for the Sustainable Development Goals. If we are working together, we're forming that partnership. In fact, the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 will be gone, just like the Millennium Development Goals end in 2015, but we can always work forward with the development ideas there in partnership with each other as diasporans and with people that we work with. Another issue I would like to highlight here is that culture, again, cultural change. I think we can do a little bit more using the purple word here. We came, we saw, and we want to make a change. Where do we make the change? I was explaining the idea of Ubuntu, which was very nice that we work together as Africans. Our Sankofa Ghanaian word, let's go to the past and pick the best that we could, which is exactly what we're doing here. 1960s about people, our leaders try to form the African Union, and we are taking it into the future. We can use all those ideas to build up. And I've already been talking about economic, political, etc. Mental health, for example, is no longer taboo. We can see even leaders, not so long, the ex-Prime Minister of Australia, ex-Prime Minister, the immediate ex-Prime Minister was talking about mental health. In years past, it's things that we don't talk about. We have diasporans here that are working actively in our home countries. When they went, they came here and went back and saw that people with mental challenge abilities are treated inhumane ways. We have had organizations that are promoting mental health activities a lot in Africa. Youth engagement, Ajua, you have presented on that, and I know you are still working on it, a very important issue. Our youth are trying to go outside to the so-called...
Doc, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Time up.
Kindly
Time
ask
up.
if you could wrap up. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so we can contribute in so many ways, and then we have supporting structures in our home institutions, our universities, communities, they all the same. We can use them to our advantage. And as I'm talking about that, this one is an African impact project that are multi-institutional happening. You have Curtin University and all other universities, including Newcastle University I'm part of. So I would send this, please, if you see the PR code, if you just take a shot of it now, you can participate and have your voice in how we can strengthen diaspora in Australia here. So I would say happy Africa Day to you all. And thank you all for today's afternoon for coming to to mark this important occasion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Janet. Sorry, multitasking. So now we're on to our next speakers, Noel Zahabamwe and Matsepo Molala from the African Australian Advocacy Center, who'll be discussing the theme of Educate an African Fit for the 21st Century. Just a quick background on our speakers. Noel Zahabamwe is the founder and current chairperson of the African Australian Advocacy Center, driving consultation, advocacy, research, and policy for African Australian communities. And as a human rights advocate, Noel serves as an advisory board member on the Australian Human Rights Institute at UNSW and an advisory board member at the Refugee Advice Casework Services. And Matsepo Molala is a committed anti-racist PhD candidate at Western Sydney University. She is a board member of the African Australian Advocacy Center and a member of the Home Affairs Multicultural Women's Reference Group. She's also co-author of the report We Belong Here, Framework for Human Rights and Equity for Australians of African Descent, which was a response to the report and recommendations done by the United Nations Working Group of Experts who recently did a mission to Australia. So please help me welcome Noel and Matsepo.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Aisha. With that timer on again. Can the person who's put our slides, bring the slides up, please?
Sorry, 1 second.
That's all right. Noel, go. Can you...
Thank you. May I start by acknowledging all our special guests, also with everyone who has sacrificed their time to be here with us. So today we're going to have a very quick, short presentation focusing on what AAAC or African Australian Advocacy Center does, which is of course the Educate an African Fit for the 21st Century. We all understand that the African Union's the importance of this theme is it's an indication. So in the 21st century demands a focus on focusing on skills that are required for the modern workforce, such as digital literacy, technological proficiency, and critical thinking. So without further ado, let me start by just briefly sharing with you what the African Advocacy Center does. So the African Australian Advocacy Center serves as a representative body for African Australian communities, focusing on advocacy, research, and policy development. We do this with two reasons. One is to make sure that African Australian voices are heard, so from local to federal level, and also second thing, using evidence-based, especially when it comes to issues or challenges that are faced by people of African descent. So we're having the short presentation that my colleague Matsepo is going to share with us. And then if there's any questions, please you can ask through the chat, or you can even ask the questions later on. So Matsepo, it's your floor.
Thanks, Noel. Yes, I too would like to acknowledge traditional owners of the lands on which we are gathering today. And thank you, Dr. Rugare, for making this event possible. And yes, happy Africa Day in advance, everyone. Can I have the next slide, please? Yes. So as we discussed, we are here today to talk through African Union's mission. And as Noel and Dr. Jato were saying, you know, African Union is it's an organization that's trying to unite Africa or have common purpose and shared goals and objectives across the African continent. And for this year, the theme is Educate an African Fit for the 21st Century. Now, for the African Union's Agenda 2063 highlights that there are important, inclusive and equitable quality education needs. There's a need for lifelong learning. There's opportunities and emphasis on science and technology and mathematics fields to kind of build those skills and that knowledge within the African continent. And to be able to achieve these goals, it is critical for Africa's sustainable development. Achieving these goals is a critical attainment for Africa's sustainable development and competitiveness into the 21st century. Next slide, please. Again, we are sort of underscoring the importance of education here. Education in the 21st century does demand that we have people who are skilled to be able to have a modern workforce. So we need digital skills or basic technology skills, really, and proficiency. And we need a lot of critical thinking skills, so to be able to develop critical skills amongst the African population. We understand that education is a cornerstone for economic development, economic growth, social development, as well as individual empowerment. And certainly, Dr. Jato has touched on those items as well. Next slide, please. Now, we do have challenges, unfortunately. Looking at the African Union's kind of report around some of these issues, it's really concerning, right? The fact that there's 14 out of 22 countries in the world with literacy rates below 60% can be found in sub-Saharan Africa, that there's massive teacher shortages within the region, broadly speaking, that the highest number of out-of-school children of primary and lower secondary school going age, about 32 million, they are all in sub-Saharan Africa. There's high rates of exclusion from school access generally. This could be family circumstance, finances, lack of abilities to get to school, so schools being a distant way to be able to get kids there safely and back home. So some of those issues, and the fact that a lot of young people in sub-Saharan Africa are out of school, basically, and these are stats from the current reports from UNESCO that's looking at these particular themes. And that broadly, spending by African governments is actually below the benchmark or recommended spending of around 4% of GDP across all countries to actually be able to deliver some of that quality education. Next slide, please. And the foremost leader of Southern Africa said that education is the most powerful weapon which we can use to prepare our youth to become the leaders of tomorrow. So we have an opportunity really to leverage education as one platform to build those skills, to build that economic drive. Africa is has a young population. You know, it's identified as one of the growth areas in terms of population numbers. So we have a significant opportunity to turn the continent around in the next century, leading up to 2050. And all of this work kind of hinges on some way being able to build those skills and knowledge, those critical skills, those technology skills within the African population. Next slide, please. So we have an opportunity again, echoing the same sentiments as Dr. Jato there, that as diaspora, we are the people with some skills. We've got a different experience. We've got networks. We're building social capital. We've got people in parliament here who are representing our people. And so we've got those opportunities to actually leverage some of our knowledge, skills, and experience to be able to contribute to the motherland, if you like. We've got a community that's trying to contribute significantly in terms of the education. Again, it's looking at some of those relationships, those partnerships that Dr. Jato talked about that we can actually use to be able to start looking at how to make sure that the skills, so the brain drain actually goes in reverse, that we come and acquire the skills and we go back to Africa to be able to make the necessary contribution. Next slide, please. So again, it's really kind of looking at the fact that we have that pivotal role to play as Africans in the diaspora in leveraging our resources, the expertise and the networks to be able to impart that capital and being able to build that educational capacity across the African continent through work that is being done by the diaspora. So this could be looking at scholarships, being able to provide mentorships, technology integration and partnerships. And this is really working with some of the organizations that we can leverage from Australia to be able to take technology that is useful. So there's got to be a little bit of that distinction between taking obsolete material that we call recycling and we go and dump it in African countries in the hopes that someone's going to make something out of obsolete technology, that we're actually taking technology that is useful, that meets the needs of the communities and can make a difference in terms of access to technology in the African continent. Again, we can play that advocacy role and that leadership development role, echoing the same sentiments around, how do we work with the embassies in Australia that are representing Africa so that they know who's in the pool, who's got the skills, who can they leverage, how do we make these relationships work so that we can actually contribute. And we don't have to actually look at it as in, I need to contribute back to South Africa being the South African person, but that I can contribute right across Africa broadly as the continent. So it's really looking at how can we work collaboratively. Next slide, please. I'll hand over to Noel now to talk about some of these examples that I've spoken to. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Matsepo. So we've got many examples. For example, we can have initiatives and programs that will benefit our people from Africa. Also, we have to make sure that as African Australians living in Australia, so we can lead or we can also initiate some new innovative programs that will help our people, especially in area of education. We can also build in the sustainable partnerships. For example, we can build partnerships with local universities here, like business people, also some like corporate companies. So to make sure that they have that emphasis in education in Africa. Of course, advocacy and policy influence. We are here in charge of making sure that we establish advocacy groups or to make sure that we influence policies that can focus in Africa. Of course, we can also do like empowering the next generation, especially young people in our team. So at AAAC, we always focus on the youth because we understand if we want to build a strong African Australian community, we need to invest on the youth. Last slide before we finish. Yes, so the role of African Australian advocacy, as we said before, so we can work as a bridge, the gap between Australia and Africa, facilitating that collaboration, mobilizing resources, creating platforms, policy and influence, but with education initiatives. Last but not least, Africa Australia Advocacy Center can work and enhance the diaspora impact on African education landscape. But as Matsepo said, we need to work as a team. This is a collective action. It's not individual action. So if we work together as a community, we can achieve so we can promote our community, we can encourage our community to be a community that serves its own, also a community that can serve back home. Thank you.
I think there's one or two more slides that I just
I'm afraid.
Oh, that's what I did. Yeah,
good.
I just wanted to call out.
Let me use an example how, for example, AAAC can drive this. Like very recently, we were able to work with the UN working group of experts on people of African descent. So what we did, the UN working group was able to work with us. We worked together. We demonstrated that there's issues that impact our people from African origin. So with the UN collaboration, we're able to, we are working together to push the Australian government, to make sure that, they close those gaps. The gaps, for example, in the area of racial discrimination. We know that people from African background in Australia, we face racial discrimination. It's one of the major issues. So that's what we are working on, but we can't work alone. That's why we want, for example, academic institutions, policymakers, and ambassadors to work with us to make sure that we work with the Australian government to close those gaps. Of course, whoever we are, whether our kids are born here, we have to remember that Africa is our motherland. Africa is where we come from. That's why we want to have this regular conversation, not only on an annual basis, but on a regular basis to learn, to teach our kids what is Africa and how we can help Africa, especially in the area of education.
We'll have to stop you now. Noel,
we need to have a better education. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our three speakers so far, Dr. Jato, Makepo Molala, as well as Noel Zimbabwe. So thank you so much for your presentations. My role now is to introduce our guests, then allow them to address us. Our first guest is His Excellency Ambassador Hadera Abba, who represents Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, here in Australia. Ambassador Abba is here on behalf of the African Ambassadors Group in Canberra. So we want to thank you, His Excellency, for coming, but also to thank the Dean of the African Group in Canberra, His Excellency Tapera Mishi, for supporting us and nominating you to come to address us today. So welcome, Say. I also wish to introduce our guest, Professor Patricia Davidson, who is the Vice Chancellor and President of the University of Wollongong. Today, she is accompanied by the Dean of the Faculty of Arts, Social Sciences and Humanities. That's the faculty where I belong. I can see Professor Piet Kelly in the meeting. Thank you for joining us. As well as the Head of Discipline for Social Work, Associate Professor Mim Fox. Welcome, Mim. I also want to acknowledge academics and professional staff and students from the University of Wollongong in attendance today. Welcome, Professor, and welcome those from the University of Wollongong. At this moment, I want to hand over to you, His Excellency Ambassador Hadera Abba, to address the meeting. Thank you, and over to you, sir.
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I would rather make my remarks in writing because I'm representing the African Ambassadors Group here in Canberra. Therefore, once again, thank you very much. I would like to address members of the African diaspora community in Australia and the Pacific, vice guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let me also begin today by acknowledging the Ngunnawal and Nombra peoples as the traditional custodians of the land where we, the African Ambassadors Group in Canberra, live and work, and recognize any other people or families with connection to the lands of the ACT in the region. I would like also to acknowledge and welcome other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who may be attending today's event and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Let me extend my greetings to you all in my native national language, Amharic. On behalf of the African Ambassadors Group in Canberra, I am deeply honored to join you today in the African Day Indaba 2024 celebrations. I am also honored to partake on this auspicious African Day Indaba 2024 as envoy of one of the oldest independent African country, Ethiopia. At the same time, I am privileged as a diplomatic agent of one of the founders and host government to the headquarters of the Organization of the African Unity, now the African Union, where we have gathered today to mark its foundation, its formation 61 years ago. On this occasion, allow me to thank Professor Patricia Davidson, Vice Chancellor and President of the University of Wollongong, for being with us today. Professor, your attendance today symbolizes your deeper commitment to fostering the cooperation between the peoples of Africa, Australia, and the Pacific region. I would like also to thank the African Australian Advocacy Center, the African Studies Association of Australia and the Pacific, the Australian Research Network to African Academics, the Center for African Research Engagement and Partnership, and the University of Wollongong for hosting this symbolic event. On behalf of the African Ambassadors Group in Canberra, I would like to thank the organizers of the African Day Indaba 2024 for extending the invitation. I would like to particularly thank Dr. Rugare Ugabante for the tireless effort he has made to ensure the representation of the African Ambassadors Group in this event. Thank you, Doctor. Invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, Africa is the youngest continent in terms of its demographic structure, with a population of 1.4 billion and 3.4 trillion combined economies. Africa, owing to its demographic dividend and untapped resources, undoubtedly holds the key to global wealth creation and prosperity. Over the next 3 decades, Africa is expected to experience the fastest growth in population forecasted to reach 2.5 billion. The increase in the working age population will be higher than any of the continents, with a projected net income of 740 million people by 2050. During this period, the combined economies of the Sub-Saharan Africa, in particular, West Africa, East Africa, Central Africa, and Southern Africa, is expected to reach 29 trillion. However, Africa can only pave the way.
Statement.
Can only pave the way to inclusive and globally competitive growth by investing in its human potential, by making education as the key growth driver for its success. Recognizing the critical role education plays to unlock the full potential of our continent and the significant challenges Africa is facing in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals on education, the 37th ordinary session of the Assembly of the Head of States and Governments of the African Union that took place in Addis Ababa in February this year decided education as its key priority for the year 2024. Indeed, the two-day meeting was held under the African Union's theme of the year, which says educate an African fit for the 21st century. Building resilient education systems for increased access to inclusive, lifelong quality, and relevant learning in Africa. Invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, this is the very theme under which this event is taking place today. And on behalf of the African Ambassadors Group in Canberra, I would like to express my deepest appreciation to the host, organizers, presenters, and participants of the African Day Indaba 2024 for putting the African Union's key continental priority of the year to the forefront. We applaud the efforts we are making to use this annual event as an important vehicle not only to raise awareness about Africa and its rich history, diverse culture and society in Australia and the Pacific region, but we also commend your continued commitment in helping shape our destiny through your valuable contributions geared towards addressing the challenges Africa is facing in the education sector. We greatly value the contribution of the growing African diaspora community living, studying, and working in Australia and the Pacific in many important ways to the economic development as well as the social, cultural, and political diversities of their host region. We also recognize and appreciate your valuable support to your respective home countries and the African continent in general. We are grateful to the educators, advocacy groups, and friendship associations, members of the African academic community, organizations for your efforts in promoting cooperation and mutual understanding between the peoples of Africa, Australia, and the Pacific region. The Australian African Universities Network, a group of leading universities in Australia and Africa, connecting academics and researchers through institutional partnership, is also serving as an important forum in addressing research and development challenges facing the continents, enhancing engagement and partnership between the universities in the two regions in addressing common challenges, training exchanges, programs to produce leaders both in the public and private sphere is critical to meaningful collaboration between Africa and Australia. Invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. Finally, I would like to thank the Australian government for its commitment to assist Africa in addressing its development challenges in terms of providing training and capacity building through the prestigious Australian Awards program. We thank also its generous financial assistance to the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research for undertaking impactful agricultural research projects in Africa, which is actually changing the lives of millions of African farmers in the agriculture, forestry, livestock, crop, climate change, soil, land, and water management systems. As I conclude my opening remarks, once again, allow me, on behalf of the African Ambassadors Group in Canberra, to thank the organizers, presenters, and participants of this event for your collective commitment to help fulfill the aspirations and developmental goals of the African Union. I would like to wish you a very successful presentations and discussions. The African Ambassadors Group in Canberra looks forward to receiving the final published document from the discussions today, which we believe enhance the discourse on education and development in the African continent. God bless Africa. Long live the friendship between the peoples of Africa, Australia, and the region. I thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador Abba, for your remarks and for wishing us happy Africa Day. At this moment, I wish to call upon Professor Patricia Davidson to address the meeting. Over to you, Professor Davidson.
Thank you so much. Your Excellency, thanks so much for being here with us today. Our colleagues from around Australia and Africa, members of the African Australian Advocacy Centre, and a special thanks to you, Rugari Mugambate, for your leadership and advocacy at the University of Wollongong. In my few remarks with you today, I just wanted to make a few comments about some of the issues that we face in our current world, some of the challenges ahead of us, and my thanks to Dr. Manchepo, who gave a really excellent overview of current issues that we face, and really talk about the importance of collaboration. And also, again, on this special day, echoing the words of Nelson Mandela, education is the most powerful force that we have to transform the world. So today is a very, very special day. Africa Day is celebrated every year on the 25th of May, and this celebration marks the formation of the Organisation of African Unity and now the African Union, and we've heard from the ambassador. But today I think it's really important that we reflect on the history of Africa and how it shaped not just the continent of Africa, but the world. Today, this year's theme is Educate an African Fit for the 21st Century, building resilient education systems for increased access to inclusive, lifelong, quality, and relevant learning in Africa and also around the diasporas all around the world. I think it's really important as we begin that we think about the history And I really want to echo His Excellency's acknowledgement of the traditional owners of the land on which we live here in Australia. We have one of the most ancient civilizations, over 65,000 years, bringing rich knowledge and cultural diversity to our continent, Australia. And I think it's important to recognize that Africa is a continent of huge complexity, diversity, history, and civilizations with over 55 countries. But also, we cannot talk about the history of the great continent of Africa without recognizing the impact of European colonialization. And just as at the University of Wollongong, we recognize the devastating impact of colonization on our First Nations people, I think we also, if we're going to talk about education, we have to recognize the impact of colonization and move forward in this ambitious agenda for lifelong learning to make sure that we take the important cultural underpinnings of African culture in its diversity and heterogeneity into our educational strategies. As I mentioned, Dr. Machepo gave a really good overview of some of the challenges that the African continent is facing. But we also have to think about the impact of intergenerational trauma, not just from colonization, but from internal conflict and civil war. We know that there is ongoing geopolitical conflict, and the emergence of non-state-based actors make managing these conflicts even more challenging. I think as we now look at the ongoing conflict in the Sudan, which has forced more than 8.6 million people, from adding on to already 2 million people who had fled to neighboring countries such as Chad, South Sudan, and the Central African Republic. So without building too much on previous conversations, undoubtedly the continent of Africa and diasporas all around the world face unique challenges, but they also have demonstrated a huge resilience. And I'd really like at this point, as we think about how we're going to develop this fit-for-purpose education system, that we look at the foundations of African culture from a model of resilience, not deficit. And we think about what are the models of education that we can have to really inform not just what is happening within Africa and the diaspora, but in other regions around the world. I reflect back on the COVID pandemic, which was devastating all around the world. But particularly in the beginning of the pandemic, many countries in Africa were actually faring a lot better than high-income countries because of their robust community health mechanisms and the sense of community. And just being on this call today for just a half an hour, I sense that community. I sense that strength. I sense that allegiance to your foundations culturally. And I think it is really important that you as a community take those forward and really challenge the aspects of colonization, which in some ways have repudiated many of the great benefits of the traditional owners of your lands and your traditional knowledges. I also want to think about some of the challenges that we are faced in Australia at the moment. One of the things that really concerns me all around the world is these moves towards nationalism and populism. There is a lot of naming, blaming, and shaming of migrants. We see what is happening in decreasing the number of international students coming to this country, blaming them for the housing shortage, but yet we know that international students only consume 4% of the rental market. But as my Director of Government Relations says, international students don't vote. So to all of you here, I just really want to echo sentiments from many of my Vice-Chancellor colleagues that international students are welcomed in this country and that we welcome the knowledge that you bring, and your diversity enriches the experiences for our Australian students. And we learn just as much from you as we learn, as you potentially learn from our education that we deliver. So I also want to build upon some of the comments that were made about the importance of scholarship and sponsorship. And I think these are critically important. But also I really encourage you to share the depth and breadth and richness of your culture, and not just from what people often perceive of African culture as music and dancing and wonderful food, but also of the rich depth of knowledge that you have. And also how this sense of community and tradition is critical in developing social capital, which is and cohesion, which is one of the real challenges that we face here. So I also want to recognize the courage that it takes for each and every one of you to travel across the world, to a different country, to a different land, and commend you on what you do, not just to enrich the Australian society and our culture, but I know a huge amount of you are sending remittances back to your home countries, are doing everything that you can to develop capacity and support in your countries in Africa. And the task that I have given myself after today, because as I read about what people who are not from Africa can learn today, is I've charged myself with the task of learning more about Africa. And I think that is one of the really important things that you can teach here in Australia. You are a vast continent, you are a diverse and heterogeneous population, and you have a lot that you can contribute to enriching Australian society. But also the collaboration of African diasporas across the world is going to be increasingly important, particularly to address the challenges in the post-COVID world, with particularly to address the healthcare challenges. One of the great successes of the world has been addressing the HIV pandemic. And we have to all keep our foot on the pedal, because some people think that is a battle that is won. But we know now that there are many more healthcare challenges, and now particularly as Africa moves through this epidemiological transition, the burden of chronic conditions, particularly cancer and cardiovascular diseases, are just as important. So I will stop there. Again, I really wanted to commend the organisers. I think be very bold and brave. I really want to echo the fact that you are welcome in Australia. And I apologise for any of the negative rhetoric which can make a whole range of international students, not just from Africa, but from different parts of the world, feel marginalised and alienated. But as these voices of nationalism and populism become more fierce around the world, I think it's really important on these days that we stand up for diversity and the power that brings to creating a more equitable and just world. So again, thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you, Rugare, for your leadership at the University of Wollongong. And I wish you a lot of great conversations over the next little while, and a happy, happy Africa Day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, it seems like we haven't got the clap hands functions working, you know, when everyone finishes speaking. Anyway, so we'll have a look at that in a minute.
Thank you so much, Professor Davidson, for sharing your remarks with us. And now we're back to our presentation. So I'm very excited to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Levi Osowagu. My apologies again if I am completely butchering your names. He will be discussing the topic of fostering of research and mentorship in Africa, a journey through Australia and beyond. Dr. Levi is an award-winner, prolific leader and entrepreneur. Currently, Levi is a senior lecturer and academic lead in rural health at Bathurst Rural Clinical School, Western Sydney University, and specializes in health promotion and disease prevention. He is the convener of 2 international research groups consisting of collaboration between Africans in the diaspora and those living in Africa. And Levi is one of the leaders of the Australian Research Network for African Academics. So thank you so much. And I guess, silent Zoom-like applause, please, for our next speaker.
Yeah, thanks, Aisha. Can you enable my share screen? Because I can't from here, if that's okay. All right, thank you for that. That's okay.
Is it all good?
Yeah,
Great.
it should be okay. Yep, thank you. I'm not sure. Yeah, so thanks. I guess my screen should be showing now, is it? Is it okay?
Yes, you're all good.
All right, good. Thanks everybody for making time to be here. And what a way to go after the Vice Chancellor of Wollongong has spoken, and elegant speakers like the ambassador himself and Noel, my good friend. It's some sort of pressure, but again, that's why we're here. It's important to exchange those ideas and share some experiences. So my name is Levi Osowagu, like they've said, and intentionally I put on my first slide a Nigerian optometrist because it will all make sense with some of the things I'm going to share with us today. I work in Bathurst Rural Clinical School. It's part of School of Medicine in Western Sydney University. Now, just like every other speaker, I also want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from which I'm speaking from today, the Wiradjuri Nation. I do acknowledge the elders past, present, and emerging. And I also want to state that they've given us a wonderful opportunity to be part of this land that they've cared for several years and magnificently looked after it for us. So we do appreciate that as well. Now, so I'll quickly give an overview of the things I'm going to speak about today. So I'll talk to you briefly about one of the African research networks that we built in Australia and how that has shaped the research that we do here as well. I'll take you through a small journey about my international collaboration that we've started. I'll keep going as well, and I'll talk to you about some mentorship opportunities that we've opened up for African young people as well. So the Australian Research Network for African Academics is a movement that started with just 2 young men who are now a bit older, a Ghanaian and a Zambian, who saw the need to start to think about ways to overcome the disadvantage that African academics face in Australia. At this point, it was a personal experience, and then somehow they got another professor who also got involved, but didn't want to be in the limelight, Professor Sefa. And from that onwards, this group has emerged, and took some while a bit from 2020 up until 2023 when we officially got registered. And at this point in time, there's about 306 members across different Australian institutions. This includes both research centers, professional bodies, and academic institutions as well. Now, currently, the leaders of this group are listed on this slide: Obed, David, some of the directors include myself, Edith, who is also here, Christina. Recently, we have a new addition, Irene Ngune. So we've come slightly a little bit long way now. Now, so these are the objectives of what the group is about. So basically, what we want to do is to promote and encourage research and collaboration among Australian academics, of African origin and those also working with people who are not of African origin. Now, this is because we see the need for collaboration, we see the power in working together. And through this also, we extend mentorship to younger people who are doing their PhD. We share ideas, we look at their COC documents, we ask them what their challenges are, and there's always somebody to share experiences as to how they move past those challenges. So this group have really energized so many of the young people who are part of the group to be able to speak in a space where they are free and they're not being judged, and we're able to give our opinions as well as academics. So that's basically what we do in the ANA group. Now, I just want to show you a little bit about the people that make up this group. So across institutions, there are about 46 of us. And when I was sent this invitation to present today, I kind of thought, why would it be Levi? And on going through the data, I understood why it was me. Because Western Sydney University make up the largest proportion of these individuals in the group. So, and I'm part of that team. So that really tells why I got that invite, and it justified that I'll be speaking about ANA today. So interestingly, we are growing, and there's also call for membership. If anybody's interested, it's a free group. We'll welcome you. We'll gladly think that there's a role for everybody who is a member of that group as well for us. Now, recently, we've been involved in so many projects, and these are the 4 that I could list here because of time. And just because some of these 4 are almost completed, or somehow manuscripts are being drafted. Now, the first study here, which I want to highlight to you, is improving mental health, help-seeking behavior through a culturally responsive mental health literacy process. Now, this we did a systematic review to look at what evidence is actually there on how Africans seek help. And the findings were astonishing. It's published in PLOS ONE. And I'll just give you a snapshot of what we found in that study. As a way of practice, just because we are all here to celebrate Africa's Day, if you will be happy enough to just share on the chat window for me, what term do you describe mental health in your language in Africa? What single term would you say, this is what mental health means in my language? That would be helpful, because at the end of this talk, I will collect those suggestions and I'll look at them later. I don't want to see what way we describe mental health. What is the term that mental health is used to describe in your locality? That would be very good if you can help us do that. Yeah, so some of these studies as well are ongoing. Some of the manuscripts are being drafted, and some of them as well were still collecting data at some stage. So this is some of the groups that we are involved in. Now, from this particular group, we've been able to also apply for small grants. And in the last 2 years, we were successful at 2 small grants, which has helped us to do some of the studies on mental health. And the second study as well will be rolled out just about in a week's time. And some of the people in this meeting as well will be contacted for help with distributing the questionnaires and the interview participants that we'll be looking for. So it's really a group that has come to stay, and we're doing lots of work. Now, just a highlight of what we found in the systematic review. We looked at literature that involved Africans who migrated to Australia voluntarily. We avoided any impact of trauma, so it was easier to then look at this evidence from those who came into Australia not being forced. And we found that there were barriers for them that they identified for why they could not seek mental health support. And some of those barriers, I've highlighted the ones that are very close to us, in the sense that we all have a role to play in changing the mindset of the people that we belong to as our community. Including those back home and those who are here as well. We found that our cultural belief is still a big issue. Some of us also think that that religious groups can take off the way we feel, and that's the solution. There's cultural shame and stigma that's around mental health challenges that is still endemic in our society. The issues of racial discrimination from health providers during maternal care was part of the roles that we see playing, making people not seek help. There's also the issue with temporary immigration. When you arrive here, your status doesn't give you access to health care easily. That also impacts the way people seek for help. There's lack of trust in the community that we are part of as well, for fear of being stigmatized and profiled if you're able to say that, look, I'm going through something like depression. So this are some of the main findings of that study. And the study is in +1, is open access, anyone can download and read. So I won't go into much details about that, but just to highlight that we also found that proficiency in English language and having a higher educational status was one of the facilitators for why people could seek help. So it's important that we didn't find lots of literature on this subject. In fact, I think it's about 7 or 6 documents that we were able to review. That shows you the large gap that exists in this space for African migrants who are living in Australia. So we do need a lot of evidence to also substantiate these findings and to find out other ways as well that we can help to support this cause. Now, so as part of ARNA, we don't just do research. We try to catch up again because this physical contact, being able to bond, to connect with people is part of human life. And for us Africans, this is a very important part of our connection. So we try to meet once in a while. There was a meeting held in Melbourne, which was hosted by one of the members of the group. Each time we travel, find somebody we can connect to. On one of these pictures, I went to Melbourne and I found David, and he was able to leave work and come out, and we had some time out. I also visited some of our friends as well while in Melbourne. And Katomi, who is also here, very known in our community, we had a visit to her place with my family, and we had a good time. These are people that I would never have connected with before, if not through this group. So there's really benefit besides the research we do in connecting with others, and we've begun to do some work together through this connection. Now, I'll take you through some of the little international collaborations that we've built. So somehow in 2021, we became celebrities in Western Sydney University. I say celebrities because it's not common to see our faces on the university web pages. So this is because we did some work in Africa. We started a group around the COVID-19 pandemic. And for this group, we thought it was necessary because all the projections from different stakeholders, different groups were saying that Africans at this time, almost half of us would have been dead. That was very scary. And we thought, why don't we start doing something? We can get the data before all of us leave. But we knew that there was need for evidence from the grassroots to show what is happening in Africa. And one way that we did that was to make sure that we can provide factual information to combat the myths around COVID-19. A lot were going on in our community then. People thought COVID-19 was there to destroy the world. Some people thought God sent it, so all of us will die. Some even thought that COVID-19 was not existing at all. Some went into a full tank of hot water just to get COVID-19 off their body. There was a lot happening in Africa that we thought, why don't we look at the evidence? What is it that is true and what is it that is not true? And we're able to provide that information. We had different workshops across Zoom. We had so many community groups that we had to have a chat with. We spoke to our own families to tell them what we know about COVID. It also made us open up our expertise to read wider around COVID-19 so we can understand what the facts are and what is not. So this is how we built this group. And across this group, we are focusing on how we can use international collaborations to provide factual evidence to people back home and those living in diaspora. And today I can tell you that that group has done excellently well. It's still functioning. We have changed our idea. We're going into malaria vaccine now, which is being rolled out across Africa. And just within that time space, we're able to achieve a lot of things. That collaboration was built out of trust and the need for evidence-based to provide information to our people. Majority of those in that group joined by invitation. Somebody knew someone, they referred the person to us, and then we tried to bring them along. But they were all academics, different schools across Africa. We have members across Cameroon, South Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, some in New Zealand, Australia as well. And this all came together, UK and Scotland as well, we're part of it. And we're able to work together across nighttime meetings, trusting each other, making sure that we can always relate this back to the community that we come from. And these are some of the achievements that I want to share with you as well today. Within this time frame of 15 members across 9 countries, we were able to publish up to 18 articles. This group was a multidisciplinary team. It included people from different species of life. We had optometrists, we have people from computer science, public health, global health, psychiatry, nutrition, epidemiology. So it's a very diverse group. And together, our expertise were brought together just for a common goal. And you could see the learning that comes from this. I learned how to do social work research just because I work with people in that group. I learned what it is to do business chain, all these supply chain languages, the way articles are written, they all came because we opened up our mindset to learn. And that's how Africans work together. We have a mutual respect for each other. We meet every night as well. And that was really ongoing for a very long time. And the commitment was something you cannot understand. It was just over the moon. So we did that as well. And through that collaboration also, we also looked at different ways as well that we can mitigate the impact of COVID-19, like I said. The group's goals was mostly to drive empirical research from an African perspective. We try to engage policymakers from our findings. One of our papers was sponsored by WHO, so we can start to combat the misinformation across Africa. So the group actually did well, and that's what Africans can do together if we bring our forces for a common goal. And like I said, we got a grant as well from Nigerian government, which we used to do a study during the COVID-19. The second phase of that study is ongoing. We had almost all members of that group got promotion of some sort. In fact, 3 members became professors. Others went from one stage of their career to the other. They got peer recognition. And we had all these interviews as well. And these were all the benefits that they were recounting as part of being members of this group. Now, one of the big things that came out of this group was the publication of this article.
Sorry, I'll be stopping you now, Doc, if you can wrap up.
Yep, thanks there. So we're launching a book from that collaboration as well, which is being sponsored by Western Sydney University Library. And just a quick one here. This is the other group about the eye focus. WHO has come up with recognizing that refractive error is one of the main causes of preventable blindness. We started this group, it's domiciled in South Africa. The website is all there for you to have a look at. And again, that's another collaboration that has impacted the society as well across Africa through research and mentorship. Now, very recently, we started a group of students who are engaged in mentorship. We're training them to do research, and across the board, we're seeing the energy and the zeal from Africans to be part of this group. A lot of them have gone up to obtain fellowships and were able to save through advocacy, got sponsorship for research, and we also got some scholarship for some of them to do PhDs, and some are also doing their master's program now in UKZN in South Africa. So at the end of this, it's just that the little contribution you make is important. Don't underrate what you can bring on board. Africans need your expertise. You don't have to have everything, but the little you can offer, somebody will benefit from it one way or the other. So I do commend everybody here who's looking back home to see how they can contribute to the welfare of the people that we are also representing here. So thank you for being part of this group. And again, happy Africa's Day to everybody.
Thank you so much, Dr. Levi. I think in the interest of time, I will quickly bring up our last presenters for this session of the event. So Ajwa Sun and Samuel Sakama are going to be discussing the topic of African Australian youth fit for the 21st century. Ajwa is passionate about Africa, young people, and creating impact, and is the current postgraduate representative of the African Studies Association of Australasia and the Pacific, also known as AFSAAP. And Samuel Sakama is a lawyer and a PhD candidate at the University of Canberra. His research focuses on the deportation of young people of African heritage who are non-citizens from Australia and the impacts of deportation on African families. So please, round of applause for our next 2 speakers. Thank you.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests. My colleague Samuel Sakama and I will be presenting some insights into the case of African Australian youth in the 21st century.
Thank you, Ajwa. We too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet on today and pay our respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. We log in on these countries, and hopefully you log in on the different countries as well. Thank you. Next.
Samuel and I are both current executives of the African Studies Association of Australasia and the Pacific, AFSAAP. AFSAAP has been around for many years, and its mission is to promote African studies, connecting those with an interest in this multidisciplinary field.
Some of what we've tried to do here today is to give you guys a little bit of big picture when it comes to the identity of African Australian youth. And so we've seen that the African Australian youth identity is an emerging identity. It kind of stems like from the African Americans. And the pathways to the African Australian youth identity are through migration. So which means young people that come to Australia as refugees, and young people that might have come as, skilled migrants or through the family pathway, and through the family pathways. And we wanted to know that the refugees, the majority, the refugee or humanitarian pathway is the majority pathway, how we get young people in this country. Australia offers a lot of opportunities. I mean, many of them have already been highlighted by the other presenters. Australia offers a lot of opportunities around education and employment. And currently we've seen in settlement that young people that are engaging with education and employment are doing very well in their settlement. Potentially, we've think from some of the research that we've done that there's a possibility for a brain drain for Africa, for the young people, kind of like the young cohorts that we have here that are engaging. The African continent, what the African continent needs to do though is to tap on this valuable resource a little bit because we see that there's a potential for African countries to look more to Europe and America, probably that have been traditional than Australia. But there are also in Australia, I mean, you guys will be familiar with the everyday realities of settlement that our young people go through. And research also shows that young people seem to settle faster than, the older cohorts or generations. And some of that can come from learning a language. So they will understand the language faster as compared to their parents. Settlement challenges with young people, though, include the issue of identity, whether or not they're Africanness and Australianness, they sort of dancing around it. We also see issues of belonging and also issues of dealing with, expectations just from their parents and their communities. However, young people have continued to show resilience. So there's a lot of resilience in, they staying at school, music, arts, sports, they involve in various things that like you can see on the TV, the number of young people that are even involved in the Australian, food sports. In terms of challenges, despite the challenges that Australia poses, so in terms of resilience as well, we see another part of resilience is resistance, and that resistance can be young people who might not be coping very well, so they might tend to the idea of justice involvement, probably they might tend to the use of substance. We want to highlight that as well. But those young people, it is good to say, or it is important to note that those young people are in the minority, the very small number. So I would now turn up to my colleague to speak more about the perspective of a young person. Thank you.
Within the context of what Samuel has presented, I would like to share some of my own story and reflections as an African youth born in Australia. Medin de Adjoa Abesi Asan. I was named after the young man pictured in the top left of the slide, Nana Kojo Abesi Asan, my grandfather, who has passed, who was the Omang Krado, councillor to the chief of our village in Bremang Kuntanasi in the central region of Ghana. Across the world, and particularly in Africa, names carry weight. And this is true for me because my grandfather's legacy lives on through his granddaughter who, like my fellow African youth in Africa and in the diaspora, are concerned for the welfare of our families, communities, and nations wherever we are. Looking at the African Union's theme for 2024 of education, one of the questions I am asking is, what does it take for African youth to succeed in the 21st century? And I asked this question a few days ago on my social media to a few African youth on the continent, including my cousin, Dr. Nana Yao Asan, who was a junior doctor working in a hospital in Kumasi, Ghana, and also some African youth in the diaspora. And some of the responses I received were, this is a hard question. Another response was, it takes a lot of resilience for an African youth to succeed in the 21st century. Hard work, perseverance, and patience. Another response was that we need to back each other as a community. No one should have to go it alone. And finally, entrepreneurship, creativity, and innovation, as well as tapping into the right networks. My 20 years or so of formal education reached a high point when I was admitted as a lawyer to the Supreme Court of New South Wales. But what made that ceremony especially special for me was when, to my surprise, I saw a barrister at law by the name of Uche Okereke Fisher, who is of African background, stand to deliver a keynote presentation in the Supreme Court on behalf of the New South Wales Bar Association. And I share this story because sometimes the seeds of success are planted in African youth, yes, when we can access quality education, but also when we can imagine what is possible, like I did when I saw barrister at law Uche Okereke Fisher, whether that be achieving the heights of success in established professions or taking up our place in emerging fields.
We wanted to welcome you all to our conference, the AFSAAP conference at the AFSAAP 2024 conference. So the conference will be held in Perth, Western Australia on around the 21st to the 23rd of November. And some of the themes that we'll be looking at is this idea of using the past, present, and future to position Africa in the global scheme of things. And some of those will feature around presentations around understanding African studies. In Australia, we don't have much yet developed in this space, so we're looking at developing that. But there will also be sub-themes on government, and there's sort of that, I guess, harnessing the African diaspora.
So please connect with ourselves and AFSAAP if you're interested on our social media platforms, and you can visit our website for more information. Yedase, we thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ajua and Samuel. And thank you to everyone who spoke today. And thank you to everyone for joining us for this series of presentations, who I'm sure you all found incredibly insightful, important, and just overall getting a chance to listen to some pretty incredible individuals, I do say so myself. So with that being said, I would like to encourage everyone to reach out to our presenters today, as well as the program organizers, if you'd like to find out more about what was discussed today and how you can get more involved. And I think that is it from me today. So I'd like to invite Rugare back for closing remarks, and then to also guide us into the next portion of today's program, which is the Indaba panel discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Aisha. Thank you to our presenters. Noel from AAAC is the one who's going to give closing remarks. So shall I hand over to you, Noel?
Thank you, Dr. Rugare. I want to thank our distinguished speakers, organizers, and our guests for joining us today to celebrate this very important day, the Africa Day. As we have heard today, that Africa Day holds a significant cultural, historical, and the social importance for people of African origin in Australia, just as it does for Africans across the globe. So it is a day that we celebrate the diverse cultures, traditions, and achievements of the African continent. So for Australians of African descent, Africa Day is a powerful reminder of our heritage, identity, and contributions that we make. So this year's theme, as we have heard, is Educate an African Fit for the 21st Century. So it's a call for us to reflect and act. And by investing in education and championing lifelong learning initiatives, we can help forge a brighter future for Africa and its diaspora. So each has a vital role in this journey. So let us be inspired by today's celebrations to actively contribute to this vision. Together, we can honor Africans' rich legacy, strengthen our bonds, and celebrate the vibrant diversity that enriches our global community. As we have heard, the African Australian diaspora can play a vital role in advancing the African Union's educational goals by leveraging its resources, expertise, and networks. It's only by being active that we can make those shared goals. So let us move forward with renewed determination, embracing our shared heritage and working towards a future where every African is empowered to thrive in the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Noel, for those remarks. So this marks the first part of the discussion, that's the presentations, but we now move on to the other part, which is the discussion. I hope you'll be able to stay and join the discussion. In the discussion, I'm going to be joined by Mercy Njeri Kitonga. Mercy is from Kenya and is a PhD student at the University of Zimbabwe. Sorry, not University of Zimbabwe, at the University of Wollongong. And Muhammad Bello Mahmoud, who's also a PhD student at the University of Wollongong. Muhammad is studying racism and racial battle fatigue, while Mercy is looking at education and unemployment in Africa. So we'll begin the next part by having an introduction from Muhammad.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining this session. My name is Mohammed. So I'm currently a PhD student at the University of Wollongong. So I'm currently doing research on racism and racial battle fatigue. I'm exploring the experience of Black African migrants in Australia. So that's just a little bit about me. For this particular session, I myself and Mercy will be facilitating this session. So this session is an Indaba session. So Indaba is just an African gathering aimed at discussing important matter openly and collaboratively. So, and for this particular session, we just try to we just want to hear from everyone just about how can African living and studying and working and growing in Australia and the Pacific ensure that their contribution to their home countries and continent are both impactful and enduring. So this is what this Indaba session is going to be all about. So I'll just, at this moment, I'll just leave this open for discussion. So I'll probably want to hear from every one of us about, how they think we can achieve this as an African living in the diaspora. So I think that's the question. So probably just saying the question, maybe I might have to share that question so that everyone can see what the question is on the screen. So I don't know if the host, if I'm allowed to do that. Just trying to share the question.
I think you should be able to share the question. While you do that, we can also hear from Mercy. Mercy, a quick intro from you.
Okay. I'm not sure if everyone can see the question now. Can you see the question?
Yes.
Yes, we can see
we
it.
can see it. Do I go ahead?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for that very insightful educative, very informing session that you've just had. I'm sure it's a source of inspiration to many of us and many of those who are attending this particular presentation. I particularly would like to thank all of you who have come here for this session. And to start with, my name's Admassu Gitonga. I'm a PhD student at the University of Wollongong, where Dr. Rugare Mugubate is my supervisor. I am a mature student, and I came here to do my master's at the University of Wollongong, which I did. I finished my master's in special education, and now I embarked on a PhD where I'm doing education. I mean, I'm concentrating on the effects of unemployment of the graduates in Africa, out of a very dire need for our graduates who have left school over the years, but they have not got any employment. So I don't want to take much time. I just want to share with you this part of the discussion, and we go ahead and help each other in understanding how we can come in and how we can be very impactful through our studies to see how well we can help, or how we can come together to help Africa as a whole. Thank you so much. Over to you, Mohammed.
Just back to the question. So I would just like us to talk about this as a group. If we can just look at this question and just see, because, if we can just look at the question and each one that want to talk, they can just raise hand, and the host will try and maybe unmute the person, and we can hear their perspective about what they think about how we can answer this question as an African living in diaspora, and how we can make, how can African living and studying and working and growing in Australia and the Pacific ensure that their contribution to their home countries and the continent are both impactful and enduring. So I'll just leave this open now. So yeah, I'll be hoping to hear from every one of us here today.
I've also put the question in the chat, Mercy and Muhammad, and I also wish to acknowledge His Excellency Ambassador Abba for staying in this discussion. We really appreciate that.
Okay, maybe I could go ahead and first of all, we've had very insightful, and most of the questions actually have been answered, because the different presenters, right from when we started, I noted that they were answering the same question that we have here. And it was very, very encouraging to know that we have people who have been doing this over the years. And I was wondering how, in my own way, one person from Kenya come together with other people from Africa and network to be able to bring change, however minimal it is, even in my own country or in my own community. So at least I've got very many groups here which I can join from today that have like-minded people who can help me to nurture or to grow that idea of how the deep feelings that I have, or the novel idea behind my research. For example, the Kenyans I have in mind, the graduates, how can I help them? How can we alleviate them out of unemployment? So I feel that we already have a panel through which we can join other people who have been doing this over and over again. And Dr. Rugare, we thank you so much for having brought us together. I never knew there existed such groups. So I feel very encouraged and very motivated to join such groups where we can discuss and even have a way in which people collaborate with others and have a way forward in which they can bring help to the much needed countries where we come from. Thank you.
Thank you, Mercy. I think Dr. Ukichukwu Levi-Osagwe is raising hand. Probably maybe if you can just hear from him first, just about how he think, the way forward in relation to this, how we can be impact, how we can make impact, to our continent as an African. So we'd just like to hear from Dr. Ukichukwu first.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for organizing this. I guess it's time that this discussion kind of came up because from my experience arriving in Australia and thinking that you are a Black person, it's already a bad place to start from. You feel it where you go to. But I do encourage people when I meet them, say, look, put your hands up for positions. For instance, you're not afraid to make mistakes. Because even the white folks make mistakes too. Mistakes are not afraid of color. I think being in that situation where you involve in policy making, decision making at university level, you understand that if we don't have representatives there, we cannot make certain changes that we need to apply to those below us. And I think stopping at that level where we all do disability support work and end it there does not cut it. We have to step up above that play. There's sacrifice in not making that money initially, but being somewhere where you can influence change. There's satisfaction in it. That is how I was able to impact the communities I impact on today. It's because I knew what the goal was. I had a vision. Look, I want to be somewhere where I can support somebody else to do a PhD, support somebody else to do a master's degree, because I can understand them when they work under me. Other supervisors may not have the same understanding as well. So having that ability to empower somebody else caused so many changes in those back home. I go back home and I'm looking at people who have the expertise. Do you want to do a PhD, start and publish something, write an article, increase your capacity. So when you apply here, you're at an equal playing ground to be somewhere that others want to be. So I guess in this group, we also need to talk to our younger ones. It's not all about money when you come here. We chase that, yes, because we have people back home to support. But can we look beyond that? What is the next 5 years for you? How do you see yourself being able to make change for those behind you? And you don't have to wait until you get all the money. You can do anything. Any small thing you do back home has a ripple effect. If you train somebody in academia, give them scholarship to do a master's program, that person goes behind to do for 2, 3, 4, 5 people. Even if you're just helping them to write an article, co-publish with them, it gets them a PhD admission. It gets them a master's program. You've given them one step ahead of the other ones. And I think having that ability to think differently, not just wait for when the opportunity is ripe, is important. You can step in at any time, anywhere once you're here to make a change. And that difference can go a long way to help other people. I think that's one thing I want to share that I think is very passionate to me.
Thank a lot, Dr. Levi, for your contribution. Just around the importance of mentorship in everything we do. I thank you for that contribution. So I would like to go to our ambassador now. I think he's also raising his hand. So if we can just hear from him. And I think there are other few people here as well. So we just hear from the ambassador now.
Yeah, thank you very much. Really, this is a very important event. Although it was organized under, the African Day, you have raised very, very important issues that will carry us forward in terms of, bringing a very fundamental, change in the education sector in Africa. Therefore, we would like, as ambassadors of Africa here in Canberra, to have a regular, forum where you can engage with the African diaspora community here, with all the associations that they presented today. We're just only 15 ambassadors here in Australia. We are very small compared to, 54, 55 countries in Africa. And yet we represent not only our bilateral interests, but also our engagement covers, the African continent in general. Therefore, My recommendation on behalf of the African ambassadors in Canberra is to have a regular forum, regular engagement where we can exchange ideas, useful inputs from our diaspora communities based here in Australia and the Pacific regions. Therefore, I would like to thank you for organizing this very, very useful event. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you for your contribution. We really appreciate you and for everything you've said here today and for all your contribution. So thank you. So I'll just go to the next person, who's Mashepo. So probably you can now talk to us now. So we are ready to, yeah.
I just was gonna echo part of what Levi was saying and what Ajoa has just said in the chat, that we need to really think, how do we build the networks for our young people? You know, when we are in these positions where we can possibly mentor, sponsor, and it's really also about finding those opportunities to do that work. For example, I am, part of the alumni of University of New South Wales, and whenever they do a call out for alumni to actually support people from low socioeconomic backgrounds, I put up, it's an hour, 2 hours, whatever I can afford or manage in terms of time to be there. One, it is about representing people and showing others, like, for example, it doesn't necessarily mean there'll be a lot of kids from African backgrounds in that space, but it also means that I am there sort of saying we are normal in this space, that the academy is not a wide setup. And for others to actually know that people of African backgrounds are in Australia, they are doing things and they're doing good things. So yes, in terms of mentorships and sponsorships, that's really vital. But to also come back to this idea of professional associations, I think there are a lot of lessons to learn from the old migrant communities here, like your Italians and your Greeks. Those people have built their economy. They are an economy within an economy in Australia, and we need to really start thinking around how do we sort of set ourselves up so that we can start, we are talking about trade and trade agreements. We need to be able to say, we are here, we need resources to come, or product that is generated in the African continent to service what we need that we can't probably find in Australia. So starting to make those businesses, and also making sure that we've got the, sort of associations or groupings where we can have this exchange of ideas and we can leverage people with the knowledge and the skills, and time too, to be able to carry forward some of these initiatives that we are studying, because it's easy to say, well, let's do this when we are meeting for a couple of hours, but it's work. It's the work that's in the background. It's the meetings that we've had throughout the week. So it's really kind of really, spreading the load amongst all of us. But it's a capacity building exercise for those who are in Australia to know, how do you start something like this? And, there's Dr. Mukambate, who I can actually call and ask, how can I set this up in another context? Or Dr. Levi, I want to write a paper. Where do I start? What can you support me with? So it's really kind of trying to leverage our own resources in the first instance, and not sort of looking externally for some of that support. And yeah, using our own people to do the work we want to do for ourselves and doing things for ourselves.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your contribution, Mashepo. I'll just go to our next speaker now. Our next person that want to talk to us about something. So probably her name is like Gloria. I can see one Gloria Tabby raising up her hand now. So if you just want to talk to us, that would be good.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm just, it's Gloria here, and I'm just about to actually leave. So I thought I would just quickly say thank you very much. Ajoa and Professor Rohanzo actually invited me. I didn't know about this group, so I'm very thankful to them, because I've learned so much. But I just wanted to ask a quick question before I say goodbye, and I hope to be in the future meetings, is that I work in corporate and professional environments, and sometimes some of you know my work through LinkedIn. If you're not, please follow me there. And I just wanted to say that the African diaspora, we tend to be very cautious about speaking about racism. And I take my cues from during the COVID and the way in which the Asian community came together to talk about how racism was affecting them in public spaces, on the train, and so forth. And they were able to gather and quickly use their collective, I guess, capacity buildings that we've been talking about to then show the public through research how COVID was impacting them. And guess what? The Australian community listened. When it comes to the African community, we are shy about talking about racism, but we know in closed doors how racism is affecting us. I've just heard someone talked about, I think it was Mercy, I just can't see your name anymore, who you talked about how you finish your research or degree and how difficult it is for the young people to obtain employment. These are real issues. And I just wanted to leave that thoughts in your mind to not be afraid to talk about how the way in which racism affects the diaspora, which then stops us actually being able to create and be what we're supposed to actually be because of racism. And, you know, my research is about that. And when I started off, I was looking at the experiences that we experience in the workplace about racism, but then I saw a bigger problem. The research is due to be published at the end of the year, so I'll make sure it's circulated for everyone to read. But what I'm seeing is that the power structure which causes the racism is never spoken about. But that's the one that it actually put us on a perpetual disadvantage. And I'm not afraid to talk about it. You can reach me, I will speak about it, because what I'm seeing in racism to the Black community is actually quite insidious and quite harmful. And so, yeah, I just wanted to say that to be quite explicit in terms of how racism affects you and not downplay it, because downplaying it is not actually helping our community. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that amazing contribution, Tabby. You actually, me and you, like, we actually have like a research, like we're actually researching on the same issue. So mine is just around racism and racial battle fatigue. So that's just what I'm researching on. And, just with your contribution, I can see that, that, like, the way you talk and how people just, I think the problem here is like sometimes as an African, we don't tell our stories. And, for the policymaker, what they want to hear is the stories. It's our stories and what people are going through that inform policy making and decision making. But as an African, sometimes people just try to keep things to themselves and, see it as a normal, and which is one of the importance of, like, people going out there, to talk about some of all these things. So, and, a lot of things there's a lot of evidence-based research about this, and also just the current, the most recent UN visit, the experts on people of African descent, their report, like, they compare the experience of the African people living in Australia to people living under siege of racism. So that's the word they use in their report. So, and this is just for us to know, like, and this, it cut across different sectors, not just, different age group, different, it doesn't matter if you're highly professional, there's your own level of racism you face. If you are like, blue collar, so like, we just need to keep talking about these things, because that's what inform the policy decision. So that's just my own little contribution. Is there any other person that would like to just share? We still got a little bit of time, so if we can just hear from maybe 1 or 2, 3 people, that would be good. So any other?
I'm happy to go if there's no one else, but I'm willing to wait in case there's someone else, because I've had a go.
Okay, so Any other one, like anyone would like to maybe add any contribution to this?
There are also some comments in chat, if you or Messi is able to look at those.
Okay, I'm just trying to look.
I think I'll pick up on the point that Gloria is making, and that's where the framework that we briefly touched on is really useful, because it actually does unpack some of the strategies that African Australian Advocacy Centre has come up with to deal with racism and racial discrimination. And we really have an opportunity as a group in that there is a new racial discrimination commissioner. If we collectively start lobbying that particular person to actually engage with them on how racism is impacting us. And Dr. Kathomi Katwiri talks about racism being an expensive exercise, like you are eroding people's mental health, well-being, and you're taking away people who've got great capability and talent, skills, knowledge that is lacking in the country, who can make a contribution, and you're, confining them to being poorly, to being sick, to having ill health. So it's really looking at what can we as a collective start also working around in terms of lobbying some of these institutions that have got responsibility to change the laws in Australia, to make laws effective to deal with racial discrimination, particularly in and around that sort of blue collar level area. Plus, even within the academy, the Racial Discrimination Commissioner is looking at Australian universities to really understand what is happening with racism in Australian universities. So it's not just the blue collar sector, it's everywhere, and particularly towards, it's worse, particularly towards people of African descent. It's extreme racism. It's not normal racism. They go all out these cycles.
Yeah, thank you for adding that, Shepo. I think, just to add a little bit more to it. So the issue of racism, especially when it comes to Black Africans, because Australia has its own, as a nation, we all know, we all know the history of this country. We know about white policy, and we know about the different migrant group, that come, each different migrant group, the Chinese, the Italians, other migrant group, the Arabs, the Lebanese, each every one of them, have their own fair share of experience. But the difference between us and some of all these people is some of them have a similar skin color, like the skin color that's white. But our own, it's more the intersection play a big role in our experience, and a lot of people don't talk about it. A lot of people don't. And that's why that's the importance of us going out there, telling our stories, talking, mentoring people, instead of pushing this problem aside, talking to our children, talking to people, mentoring people, and also telling them how we can fight this particular issue in Australia. So I think that's just what I want to add to it. I think Dr. Levi want to also add something.
Yeah, just to echo what Gloria said. Look, there's a push in institutions as well to make racism a topic. It's very scary when you're at the level of where we are. There are meetings you go to, you feel it, but you can't say it because of the level of people in that room. Now, I'm part of a core group in my school where we've started to look at how can we develop models. Just like you go to university, they ask you to do models on bullying, computer technology, hacking. You do all those things regularly, but there's just nothing about racism at all. But it's predominant. It's more like bullying. It's even more experienced than bullying is. But yet universities make all these small courses that you get to do continuously, almost every 3 months. But nobody wants to talk about the racism as impacting almost everywhere in the school. So I think we're looking at that movement as well. Can that be a continuous discussion? Because the more we raise the awareness, the more it is less likely that people are going to be doing that to you. So I think it's that fear of talking about it, but the energy is coming up now. People are speaking louder, and the voices are getting heard somehow. I think we as a group can also use that as a platform to start to look at how do we develop culturally sensitive models that people who don't experience racism can read through and understand how we feel. It could come from this group. It could come from any group as well. But that's something we can also be looking towards because it should help.
Yeah, thank you for that, Doctor. So just adding a little bit to that, sometimes
Mohammed, sorry to disrupt you. Are you able to stop sharing?
Okay, I'm just going to stop sharing now.
Okay.
So
just also just to know that we're above time now, so you should be doing concluding remarks, but also if you could allow Mercy time to chip in.
Okay, so I'll just Mercy has a little bit some contribution as well. So Mercy, can you just I wasn't seeing your hand like up, so sorry about that. So if you can just talk to us now, that would be good.
Mute Mercy.
Yeah, mute.
Pardon me for that. I'm saying I just put my hand up just to look at the charts that we are having today. And I think everyone is in agreement that we are doing very well in fighting. There's something that we should come together to fight racism and its form. That's from Gloria. There is also a short survey that each of us should try and fill in and send back. That's from Dr. Ugare. Kindly, there's a link on the chat. If you're able to do that straight away before you get engaged with other things and when your mind is very fresh. And that will be very helpful to us when we, especially to the convener of the meeting, to know how well we did and how we can improve in future. Someone is requesting, that's Amrita, I'm the editor of a Multicultural Community Connect Queensland Incorporation. That's a newspaper. I didn't know about that. I'm happy to publish articles on the various research and conduct with African community. Wow, that's an insightful thing. I would love to publish success stories and establish a connection with the African organizations. Please get in touch with me. That's Rita. Thank you. I'm sure we're going to do that soon. From Elizabeth, I second what
maybe you could pick the last one, Mercy, so that
just the last one. Yeah, it's too much. That's from Noel. Cheer to everyone. Africa Indaba 2024 shorts. That's a survey. Yeah, not taking too much time. Thank you so much. That's it. Mohammed, to you.
So just for the last part, guys, please, there's this survey. It's just like a short survey. So we'd probably like everyone to maybe try and just attempt the survey. That will just give us a little bit of insight about how today went, and so that we can improve on some of the activities in the future. So and also in relation to the Indaba as well, if there's any other things, I know there's a lot of people here. Even the time, 30 minutes is not enough. So if there's anything you'd like to send to us or to send to Dr. Rugari regarding this Indaba, you are welcome to send anything you want to talk about to his email, and we'll probably incorporate it to the Indaba discussion as well. So thank everyone for attending this Indaba. So, and at the moment, I will now pass this back to Dr. Rugari. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mercy and Muhammad, for the work that you have done. And apologies, everyone. We're a bit above time. It's 10 minutes past 10. I know you need to go and prepare for the weekend and to meet with your families. I've been writing down in the background issues coming out of this. This will be shared. I've got 12, but they are very raw. But I think what is coming out is that the small things that we do in small ways will contribute to improvement of issues that we've talked about today. There's also the issue of networking. I think it came out strongly, and I'm glad that the ambassador has stretched a hand to say, we are there in Canberra, engage with us. I think that's an opportunity for us to be doing that. Then also looking internally, I do think it's a very important point. And lastly, talking about racism, challenging racism, not shying away, I think is a very important point to close this discussion. So thanks again, those of you who have managed to stay until the end into this discussion. We'll be sharing with you the list of points that came out of this discussion. So I think now we'll end the meeting. You can also stop the recording. I'm sure the recording has stopped now. Those who want to chat and greet, I think there is no